This has been an incredibly tense situation for more than a week now.
Several arrests connected to a major drug trafficking operation that spans from Detroit, Michigan.
At 4:20 a.m., while most of America was still asleep, federal tactical teams simultaneously moved across multiple locations, transforming quiet streets and dark warehouses into active crime scenes within minutes. Doors were forced open, suspects were pinned to the ground, and hidden rooms began to spill out drugs, cash, weapons, and sealed records that had not been meant to see daylight. ICE agents, FBI investigators, HSI units, and DEA teams worked side by side, not chasing rumors, but executing a plan built over months of surveillance and silent tracking. This was not a random arrest or a routine drug bust, but a calculated strike against a criminal system that had learned how to hide behind normal businesses and trusted supply routes. Subscribe to Military Power, because what surfaced before dawn was only the first crack in a much deeper network that is still unfolding. Floodlights snapped on at the edge of the Illinois warehouse complex, cutting through the cold darkness and turning the open yard into a harsh white field, where every movement stood exposed. Steel doors stood tall and silent for a moment, then shook as federal teams closed in from multiple angles, their boots striking the gravel in a tight rhythm as commands were passed hand to hand without raised voices. The building looked ordinary from the outside, a place meant to store tools or spare parts. Yet, the pressure in the air made it clear that this structure was about to reveal something far more dangerous than its clean walls suggested. The first breach came fast, not with chaos, but with control, as cutters bit into metal and forced the main access point open just enough for entry teams to surge inside. Agents moved low and wide, weapons raised but steady, eyes sweeping across open space as shadows retreated into corners. The echo of boots against concrete filled the warehouse, blending with the hum of generators and the sharp click of safety switches, creating a soundscape that conveyed training and intent rather than panic. Inside, the front section initially appeared to be legal, with stacked crates, clear walkways, and printed labels that described agricultural equipment and industrial supplies. Pallets sat in neat rows, wrapped in clean plastic, each marked with shipping codes and weight limits that matched the paperwork found at the entrance. For a brief moment, the space almost resisted suspicion, presenting itself as another forgettable node in a long supply chain that moved unnoticed across the country. That illusion broke the instant agents reached the far bay, where forklifts sat powered down beside equipment far too specialized for routine storage. Panels along the floor did not align evenly, and faint seams traced lines where solid concrete should have been uninterrupted. One agent knelt and struck the surface with a tool, producing a hollow sound that carried across the room and drew immediate attention from the rest of the team. Orders moved quickly, and the floor section was lifted to reveal a second level below, wide enough for workers to stand upright and reinforced to support heavy loads. Hidden lighting flickered on, exposing a lowered space lined with steel shelving and reinforced walls, built not for storage convenience, but for concealment. Air vents ran separately from the central system, suggesting long-term use and careful planning, not a temporary solution or rushed modification. Further inside, agents uncovered sealed compartments tucked behind false walls, each one accessible only by sliding mechanisms triggered from hidden switches. These compartments housed equipment designed for speed and volume, including industrial mixers, sealed drums, and packaging tools capable of handling large-scale processing. Nothing in this area suggested street-level dealing or small-time movement. Instead, it pointed to an operation designed to supply entire regions without interruption. As teams moved deeper, the scale of the warehouse changed in perception, shrinking as its purpose expanded. And this was not just one storage point among many, but a core junction where shipments paused, were divided, and then sent onward under clean labels and with proper legal documentation. Every feature of the layout supported that role. from reinforced loading bays to private access routes that allowed trucks to arrive and leave without crossing public view. Agents marked each discovery carefully, tagging doors, switches, and access points, while additional teams secured the perimeter. Outside, armored vehicles held position, engines running low, prepared for any attempt at escape or interference. No such effort came, which itself spoke volumes about the confidence of those who had built this place, a confidence that relied on invisibility rather than force. In one sealed section, agents opened containers, wrapped in agricultural packaging, and found their contents far removed from fertilizer or tools. White powder lay vacuum-sealed inside heavy plastic, stacked in uniform blocks that filled the space from floor to ceiling. Nearby crates held compressed packages marked with false serial numbers, each one identical in size and shape, designed for easy transport and rapid distribution. Further searches revealed additional substances stored separately, each categorized and labeled for movement rather than immediate sale. Chemical containers lined the back wall, their markings indicating industrial use, yet the quantities and combinations made their true purpose unmistakable. These materials were not end products, but the building blocks of something far larger, the raw ability to produce vast amounts of drugs without reliance on external suppliers. The warehouse had been built to function without pause, and every detail reinforced that truth. Backup generators stood ready to power operations during outages, while separate water lines fed cleaning stations designed to erase traces of activity between shipments. Surveillance equipment monitored every entrance and interior zone, feeding data into a system that could be accessed remotely, allowing oversight even when the space appeared dormant. As agents cataloged the scene, it became clear that this location represented more than stored contraband. It was the brain of a logistics network valued at roughly $2 billion, a place where planning replaced improvisation and efficiency replaced violence. The absence of gang markings or defensive barricades only reinforced that assessment, showing a preference for blending in rather than standing out. This was not a warehouse meant to survive conflict, but one meant to avoid it entirely by hiding in plain sight. Its strength came from routine and trust, from the assumption that paperwork and proper labels could shield any operation from scrutiny. That assumption collapsed under the weight of coordinated enforcement and patient observation. Before dawn fully arrived, evidence trucks began rolling out under guard, carrying away crates, containers, and equipment that would never return to this building. The floodlights remained on as agents completed their sweep, leaving behind an empty shell that no longer held secrets. What had been designed as a quiet hub now stood exposed as the central engine of a criminal network that reached far beyond Illinois. If this warehouse represented the heart of the system, then the materials pulled from its hidden levels revealed the blood that kept it alive, and the next section follows those substances outward to show exactly what kind of threat they were meant to create. Inside the command trailer, screens glowed with seized tablets and encrypted phones, each device placed on foam pads while agents leaned in and worked in silence. Fingers moved fast across gloves as cables snapped into ports, lights blinking as systems woke and resisted access. Every second mattered because trucks were already moving beyond the yard. When the first lock broke, the room tightened, not with cheers, but with focus, as folders spilled routes, times, and names that had never met daylight. Agents marked their findings quietly, aware that pressure outside was building and pursuit lines were forming rapidly ahead, without hesitation now. Data carved a path across oceans as logs aligned and timelines stacked with ruthless clarity. Asian factories appeared first, masked by trade codes and clean invoices, followed by ports where containers waited under watchful surveillance cameras. From there, the trail jumped south into Mexico, shifting vehicles, switching crews, and slipping through checkpoints by routine. Each handoff showed planning, not impulse, with schedules measured and payments spaced. Agents traced these steps live, calling teams forward as routes lit screens and demanded action. Movement orders followed immediately, turning information into pressure that never paused as distant convoys accelerated toward traps already set nearby, quietly. Money trails rose next, flowing through shell firms that felt solid until touched. Accounts opened and closed with practiced ease, moving value without noise, hopping cities and borders before settling briefly. Agents watched as transfers froze when warrants were served, then observed new paths attempt to open and fail. Encryption slowed nothing because patience had already beaten speed. What remained was a picture of a business that hired specialists, tracked costs, and protected margins, behaving like a global company built for endurance. It was not street chaos, but system order under stress, designed to survive pressure and adapt quickly again soon after. Arrest orders expanded as clarity grew, spreading across cities where quiet offices suddenly filled with movement. Teams entered apartments, garages, and storage rooms with speed and restraint, securing hands and sweeping corners before evidence vanished. Phones buzzed, then went dark as signals died. In each place, paperwork told the same story with different names. Coordination kept pace as units moved like linked gears, pushing forward together while escape windows closed. Sirens stayed distant as teams departed, leaving a controlled silence behind. Evidence moved quickly to vehicles, sealing decisions already made across regions without delay, as momentum held firm throughout the night. Beyond land routes, attention shifted outward where shipping lanes cut long arcs across dark water. Patrol patterns tightened, and signals sharpened as vessels were flagged for inspection. Boarding teams moved with balance as decks rolled, securing crews and sealing holds. Containers opened under lights, revealing drums and labels meant to appear ordinary. Each seizure reduced future production, not by chance, but by removing capability at its source, a choice that carried weight far beyond the immediate catch. Sea control added pressure that land arrests alone could never achieve, while routes collapsed silently under watchful, coordinated eyes from afar today. Inside command rooms, maps are updated in real time, showing lines cut and nodes blinking out. Calls flowed without drama, directing teams to seal, search, and secure the area. The pace remained deliberate, avoiding both rush and noise. Success depended on denying reaction time rather than chasing speed. By keeping pressure constant, the operation prevented regrouping and forced choices that favored capture. It felt less like a chase and more like tightening a net, steady and patient. Every decision leaned toward containment and control. Teams adjusted their positions calmly as information arrived in waves, without pauses or confusion, despite mounting pressure from all sides simultaneously. Across borders, cooperation followed a similar rhythm, linking efforts without fanfare. Requests were processed quickly, and approvals came back clean, allowing for synchronized action beyond domestic reach. Warehouses abroad were sealed, accounts locked, and couriers intercepted with the same calm precision. Each move reinforced the others, shrinking options and increasing risk for anyone still moving product. The operation treated geography as a detail, not a barrier, pressing advantage through coordination rather than force. This approach reflected a network-scale response that matched the threat without turning streets into battlegrounds. At the same time, arrests accumulated quietly everywhere under a shared command, intent that was carefully maintained throughout the operation. Resistance rarely surfaced because surprise and timing ruled the field. Where movement occurred, teams responded with presence rather than noise, closing distance, and removing options. No shots defined the night, yet the tension felt constant as doors opened and spaces cleared. Each secured site added weight to the picture forming across screens. The absence of open conflict underscored the method, proving that control could overwhelm without spectacle when planning held firm. This restraint kept the focus on dismantling systems instead of reacting, allowing pressure to remain constant everywhere throughout the hours before daylight arrived, shifting visibility across every active site. By morning, the scope felt undeniable as tallies rose and routes vanished. Evidence filled rooms, yet the strongest result was absence, the sudden quiet where traffic once flowed. Operators who relied on routine found schedules broken and contacts silent. The network had been forced into motion. It could not control, making mistakes inevitable. This pressure aimed not to end activity instantly, but to deny comfort and predictability that sustained it. Control replaced chaos as the defining force of the operation, leaving those involved exposed and uncertain about next steps in safety, as oversight tightened steadily across interconnected corridors nationwide today. Actions on land and sea blended into one picture of sustained pursuit. Each arrest fed intelligence that sharpened the next move, creating momentum that traveled faster than messages could warn. Teams trusted the process, staying measured as pressure mounted. The operation avoided dramatic displays, choosing certainty over speed. That choice limited escape and revealed the structure beneath movement, exposing a system built to appear ordinary while hiding reach. This approach reduced risk and preserved clarity throughout the effort as teams continued advancing without pause toward remaining targets and unknown routes, still active beyond the horizon, awaiting decisive pressure soon enough. Throughout the sweep, discipline defined outcomes more than force. Movements stayed tight and purposeful, guided by signals rather than noise. Each secured site reduced uncertainty and narrowed options for those still moving goods. The night demonstrated how control could be asserted without visible conflict, utilizing patience as a form of leverage. By refusing to rush, teams denied mistakes and preserved advantage, keeping the upper hand as the map cleared. This posture discouraged retaliation and limited opportunities for disruption. At the same time, coordination maintained steady forward pressure everywhere until resistance faded into quiet compliance under constant, controlled supervision by multiple overlapping teams throughout the remaining hours of the night. As daylight settled, the picture stood complete enough to act, yet open enough to pursue. What had been revealed was not chaos, but design, a network that depended on order to survive. The response met it with greater order, applying pressure where movement mattered most. This stage closed with routes exposed and control asserted, setting conditions for the next phase, which follows the materials themselves to show how danger was built and why its removal mattered. This transition leads directly into the examination ahead, where substances and sources take center stage, revealing stakes beyond immediate arrests for communities nationwide now. Night did not end when the first raids finished because Operation Reclaim America had only begun. Across multiple states, phones vibrated inside command rooms as green lights turned to red and teams moved again. Orders flowed without shouting, without panic, as maps filled with markers showing doors about to open. This was not a single strike, but a planned surge, designed to hit every layer that kept the network alive and moving. It was the moment when reaction ended and control took over, with quiet force and clear intent, across the country simultaneously, under federal direction and with precise timing. Teams entered buildings in waves, not in haste, closing off rooms and hallways before suspects could move. Hands were secured, phones were taken, and papers were spread across tables under bright lights. Every address matched another, every name connected to payments and routes. While one team cleared a site, another was already in motion, cutting the time between discovery and action. Arrests rose by the minute, adding weight to a total that would pass 600 before dawn. One of the most significant combined efforts the agency had ever driven with such discipline and speed nationwide through coordinated teams working together without pause. Logistics felt the pressure first, as trucks were stopped, yards sealed, and routes closed in tight order. Drivers were met by lights and voices, directed to step out and wait. Keys were collected, logs were checked, and loads were held where they stood. Forklifts idled as paperwork fell apart under scrutiny. Each delay removed certainty from the network, forcing choices that led to capture. By targeting movement, the operation struck at the habit of routine that had kept illegal trade quiet and steady for years, without attracting attention until now, under constant watch by federal forces controlling access points across regions simultaneously. Financial channels followed as teams froze accounts and secured records before alerts could spread. Offices that looked ordinary were filled with agents quietly copying files, counting cash, and locking computers. Every click meant less room to move money elsewhere. Couriers waited without answers as funds stopped mid-transfer. The aim was simple: to drain the fuel that paid rent, wages, and transport. Without cash flow, control slipped and dependence on structure became clear. This pressure worked silently, eroding confidence without the need for open confrontation or public threats, as part of the coordinated nationwide enforcement effort that continued through the early morning hours. Personnel were following as names repeated across lists and contacts. Teams arrived at homes and workplaces, moving quickly and efficiently. Doors opened, rooms were cleared, and people were guided outside under watch. Some looked confused, others resigned, but all lost control at once. With each detention, links weakened and communication slowed. The operation treated people as critical nodes, not replaceable pieces. Removing them altered decisions made elsewhere, leading to mistakes. By sunrise, custody counts told a story of reach, showing a campaign built to deny leadership and direction at every level, simultaneously, through planned timing and shared intelligence between units nationwide. At sea, pressure matched land actions as vessels were slowed and directed for inspection. Decks were secured, crews lined up, and holds opened under steady lights. Containers revealed materials intended for production, not immediate sale. Each seizure cuts future capacity, reducing risk months ahead. Coordination kept operations calm, avoiding conflict while removing options. The presence of authority at sea sent a clear message that no route remained untouched. This layer added depth, ensuring the response matched the scale of the threat without unnecessary public display or drama during the extended, coordinated enforcement period across multiple maritime zones worldwide today. Despite the impact, the network did not collapse in a single moment. Signals shifted, routes changed, and structures broke apart into smaller pieces. Teams watched as new paths appeared while old ones closed. Encryption returned in various forms, slowing access without completely halting it. This behavior confirmed warnings that had already been shared internally. Damage had been done, but survival instincts remained. Rather than fight, the system hid, using legal structures and digital space to avoid attention. Movement slowed, yet adaptation continued, showing that pressure must stay constant to prevent recovery or regrouping over time under sustained oversight from multiple enforcement units operating together nationwide. This moment revealed a truth about modern crime. It does not depend on open gunfire or street fights, but on quiet systems that blend in. Logistics, data, and legal fronts replace visible violence. The response matched that reality, targeting infrastructure instead of symbols. Every move sought to limit reaction, reduce panic, and keep control. This approach transformed enforcement into a form of pressure that was effective over time. By focusing on systems, the operation limited risk to communities while disrupting harm at its source, without spectacle or noise, throughout the night and the following morning hours, under careful coordination between the involved agencies. As numbers were counted, leaders recognized both success and risk. More than 600 arrests marked the scale, yet the movement persisted. Small cells remained active, testing limits and seeking gaps. Teams adjusted, tracking signals and patterns without slowing. This phase required patience, not force. Control depended on denying predictability. making every choice harder for those still moving. Rather than celebrate, teams stayed focused, treating the operation as unfinished. That mindset kept pressure applied and prevented the network from finding rest or confidence after initial losses, despite continued surveillance and follow-up actions by federal and partner agencies across jurisdictions nationwide today. The shift in approach stood out. Enforcement no longer waited to react, but pressed forward with intent. By combining logistics, finances, and personnel, the operation reduced options at every level. This coordinated pressure changed the balance, forcing adaptation under stress. Each success fueled the next move, creating momentum that was not dependent on chance. The campaign showed how planning could outpace violence and how control could replace fear when applied with discipline. This marked a clear shift from reactive to proactive pressure, seeking long-term effects over time against complex criminal structures operating within legal systems and the supply chain. Even as the operation continued, uncertainty remained. Damage was apparent, but endurance persisted. Those involved relied on blending in, trusting systems to hide them. The response made that harder, yet not impossible. Awareness now drove the next steps, as teams prepared to follow what still moved. This chapter closed with pressure applied and routes exposed, setting conditions for the next phase ahead. The focus now shifts toward the materials themselves, tracing how they move and why their presence matters for communities facing hidden risk, which leads directly into the next section that examines substances, sources, and the danger they create. What began as a quiet warehouse in Illinois has unfolded into a picture far larger than a single raid or a single group. What federal teams exposed was not only stacks of drugs and hidden rooms, but a global system that stretched across borders, ports, and financial channels. In this story, narcotics were never just street poison. They became a national security concern, tied to supply chains, data, and routes that move through trusted systems every day. From this perspective, the danger does not end when doors are broken and suspects are taken away. If weaknesses in logistics remain open, similar networks will adapt, copy the model, and continue to hide behind legal businesses and clean paperwork. Pressure may damage one structure, but the space that allows it to grow can quickly be filled by another, often faster and quieter than before. This is why operations like Reclaim America matter, not as final victories, but as warnings and tests of resolve. Subscribe to Military Power to keep following these hidden battles, where crime, security, and power quietly collide. Now the question remains for every reader watching these events unfold. Do campaigns like this restore order or expose deeper systems hidden?